We have James Jones on the podcast. James is the founder of Bump, a Long Beach accelerator alumni, and an incredible person. Bump is backed by MasterCard and revolutionizing the way creators work and make money. Thank you so much for taking our time. This is an honor.
Thanks for having me. It's just great to obviously be in Long Beach where we're filming this, and it's great to see you and meet you in person. I know we've had some conversations over email and also over Zoom, but it's great to finally be here.
Absolutely. So, James, you've had a very interesting journey starting off as a lawyer and then a startup founder and not building in law. So
Yeah.
pivots not just in the type of career, but also the industry of career. And then as a musician and growing up, like what's your journey been like?
Yeah, my journey's been interesting. I think, it started off really, my dad was a musician on the weekends, kind of as a side hustle, quote unquote. And he was also a software engineer. And so we grew up on the East Coast. And, I was born in Richmond, Virginia. And we spent a lot of time on the road, right? And so what I mean by that is, he was a gospel musician. So he would go from church to church up and down the East Coast, DC, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida. And so one of the things he would always talk about after his performances, he did a lot of things because he was an engineer. He would do things like he'd build the speakers and I'd watch him build things. We had computers everywhere. And this was in the early days of computers. And so, he was always tinkering with different things. And so I would just kind of pick up on those things. But, I would also listen to him complain about stuff. And so he would complain about, for example, the revenue that he couldn't effectively track from the different churches he was going to perform at. And he would teach at these churches, teach music. He would also preach at the churches and perform like keyboard, whatever he had to do, sing, play the keyboard, whatever he would do it for the different churches. And so, as a child, you're always trying to make your parents proud, right? And so, I always wanted to figure out a way to make him proud by solving that tracking of revenue issue. He also had unfortunately for me, a no hands, no touching the computers, no touching the equipment policy. And so the only thing I could really do is just observe and kind of think about different things that I could do to try to solve that problem. And so fast forward so I did get a chance, obviously, to work on computers. I worked in a computer lab in college, spent a lot of time tinkering with different software. That probably kind of came from my dad's side, just being a software engineer. But I also, at some point, started getting an interest in law. And so fast forward to my career as an entertainment lawyer, I represented creatives of all kinds, artists, musicians. I also represented some of the folks on the industry side, mostly like A&Rs, the owners of record labels, owners of nightclubs. And what I found out was that a lot of the creatives that I represented, they had the same exact issues that my dad had, right? They were trying to figure out how to own their masters, how to build their wealth, how to grow their revenue, and how to track revenue. I remember having one client, I call it the 3 a.m. phone call. So everyone kind of associates that with political, in the political realm. But I literally had this client call me and say, look, James, I don't know what to do. I sold, X amount of records, and I think it was 2 or 3 million records. And he just had received this check, and it was for $10,000. And he could not believe how he could sell so many records and only have a $10,000 check. And that's what really, if you ever have someone crying on your shoulder about something that they're dealing with, that absolutely starts changing the way that you think about how to approach a problem. It gives you, and it depends on the person, of course, but it gives you this desire, a burning desire to I don't want to see people cry. I don't want to see people in pain. I want to figure out a way to help them. And so that kind of was the genesis of my entrepreneurial journey.
That is beautiful. I think it's so realistic because being so close to the problem in different ways, it just it's one of my mentors would always tell me, fall in love with the problem, never with the solution.
Absolutely. There are certainly a lot of unfortunate examples of folks that are they have a solution and they're trying to find a problem, right? And it should be the other way around. It should be, and it shouldn't even be, in my opinion, we want to create something that's better you know, a nice to have. It's almost like a multivitamin, right? You don't need to have it. You want to create a painkiller, right? And so that's why I use the example of the client, that the 3 a.m. phone call and the crying on my shoulders. Like, that was a painful experience for him, and it was a painful experience for me, right? And so I wanted to solve a painful problem.
That's beautiful. And like solving a pain, it just you have it's a great moat because you know people have had that much of an advantage working with you than without.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think the other part of it is like it has to be a little bit more than just like solving the problem. It has to be a problem that is not just experienced by one person. A lot of times that could be a really good start, you know, a problem that you yourself are facing or that someone close to you is facing. But then it goes beyond that, right? Is this a problem that is widespread? Is this a problem that's being felt by thousands of people or hundreds of businesses or even millions or billions of people, right? And so I think that's what, and then of course, on top of that, can you create a solution? And I think that's what's the most powerful thing about technology, right? And computers and now we're in the age of AI, is that you know you can figure out ways to leverage technology to solve problems at scale.
So how did you validate it beyond the first person that more people are facing it?
The good old fashioned talking to customers, right? The first version of what we built was called, we called it Owners, and it was kind of a play on words, own yours. And the company was called Owners Technology, still exists today. And the first thing we did was before we built anything, we started talking to customers. So obviously, I already had like the unfair, quote unquote, unfair advantage, a problem that is rampant, right? Is this a problem that goes beyond just like my clients, right? Is this something that goes beyond? Is it, we're talking about thousands of people, millions of people. And so we just started doing surveys. Before we built anything, we started doing surveys. We started talking to customers, and we started understanding from the customer standpoint that their idea of the solution would be to talk to someone in the industry, right? And talk them through those problems. And so and when I say talk them through those problems, talk them through the issues of like understanding how the business works, understanding how to track their money and how to collect their money, how to get signed to a label for a 360 deal or 180 deal or you know just getting signed in general. And so the first version of what we built was designed to be a marketplace connecting these creatives with industry experts to help them get advice on accounting, on finances, on you know building wealth, all of the different pain points that we heard creatives tell us.
That's quite interesting. So musicians and creatives, has it changed much from when your dad was a musician to creatives today?
It hasn't changed much in the sense that there are still similar problems that my dad faced that creators are facing today. I think the biggest issue still is monetization, right? That's still a huge issue amongst creatives. I think one of the things that also has changed is the fact that creatives are kind of multidimensional now. So they're not just like, for example, they're not just focusing on music. In the age of social media now, they're also TikTokers, they're also YouTubers, they're also Snapchatters, and so they're very diverse in terms of the type of content they put out, and they're not just limited to, for example, a musician or an influencer. They are expanding and have a lot more diversity in terms of what they do as creatives.
It's quite beautiful because it's interesting. Like the avenues have really broadened, and so you've been in this industry for a while.
Yes.
Have you've seen the industry change as a whole itself? How's that been like while building in a dynamically changing industry?
Well, I think it's like any industry, right? Like it comes with its, you know, its pressure points. I think one of the things that you have is, and it's not just unique to like the creator economy, but you have like kind of like the legacy institutions. So just think about like the legacy record labels, or think about like the legacy companies, the talent agencies, and so that's the status quo, and they're trying to hold on to that,
Yeah.
right? But then you have the disruptors, and the disruptors are responding, you know, if they're doing it right, they're responding to a groundswell of like an outcry, right? This is what the industry isn't providing us. So an example of a creative, you know, we're making all this money on behalf of a legacy institution. Where's our cut, right? And at some point, there's going to be an outcry, and the outcry is going to become public. And so a lot of times the legacy or the status quo will respond to that, and they'll make a few incremental changes, right? But then sometimes something happens where it forces the industry to change. And I use an example of like in the peer-to-peer, music file sharing realm. You think about like a Napster, right? So for a long time, you had the record labels, and they were just like, look, our model works. We go to the stores, and we place the music in the stores, and we make a line share of the money, and the artists don't really make a lot of money off of the sales. They have to go on tours in order for them to make money. Well, Napster comes along, and just think about like it from different angles, right? So the consumer is forced to go to a record store to buy an album, right, from their favorite artist. Now with Napster, with the advent of Napster, they can pick and choose the songs that they want to hear.
Yeah.
They can make CDs, and it's only the songs they want to hear. And all of a sudden, the labels are getting cut out, right? And so that's what I mean when I say sometimes you have these moments where you force the industry to change. And so all of a sudden, the labels were like, this is not working. We're losing a lot of money. We need to make a change. And so now then you saw MP3 files, you saw the iPod, and now you see Apple Music, you see Spotify, and that's and streaming actually was born out of that experience that Napster created.
It's quite interesting. I think Apple Music, like what Jobs did, was quite revolutionary, and they did the same with movies to a certain limit.
Yeah, I mean, I think with movies, it's the same thing. I mean, like when you think about that industry, you had a couple of companies that said, look, I mean, and you see it now with YouTube Shorts. You see it with like a lot of the I think Instagram, a lot of these companies, TikTok, they have like these little, 20-second, 10-second. There was a company called Quibi that, unfortunately, didn't do well. But you see this tinkering with like the industry, right? And even when you think about it from like the producer, the filmmaker side, you can use your iPhone now to make a movie, right? You don't need to have a studio. You don't need to have like this amazing budget, right? This $100 million budget. You can make a really great short film. You can make a really great film, and you can go D2C, direct to consumer, right? And so I think that's the power of the age that we're in, and that's to us, that's the creator economy, right? That's what it's all about. It's about, the creator wearing different hats, right? You can be a filmmaker. You can also post that content on YouTube. You can post it on TikTok. You can use Bump to get the funding in order for you to be able to post that content on different channels to grow your business and your brand, right? To understand your market valuation. So, and understand your market value. So, there are amazing products and amazing tools that creators can tap into now, where they don't need to have, the legacy institutions backing them in order for them to be successful.
That's so interesting. So is everyone a creator today?
In my opinion, yes. And the reason why I say that is because if you ever go to a restaurant and you take a photo of, this amazing dish that was brought out to you, and you decide to post it on Instagram, and you tag that restaurant, you're a creator, right? You figured out the angle that you wanted, you figured out the lighting, you're now sharing it with your friends are liking it, right? So anyone can be a creator. I'm not gonna say everyone is a creator, but anyone can be a creator.
That's quite beautiful, because that makes the market 8 billion people potentially.
Exactly. And that's, I think, we were able to successfully fundraise. I know we're going to get into that, shortly. But I think in part because people investors look at the market opportunity, right? And so when you think about the fact that anybody on this planet can be a creator, and they could potentially need tools, whether that's funding, that's obviously, that's a resource, but like they may need tools in order for them to become a professional, creator. That makes it, a very enticing and a very intriguing market opportunity. And so yeah, I mean, anybody can be a creator. Now, obviously, the way that you define a successful creator is going to be different, right? There certainly are some creators that are, want to be like a one-hit viral wonder, right? They want to put out one piece of content and hope that, 10 million people, share it and there's high engagement and all of a sudden, like, they make a lot of money, right? But you find that in every industry, right? Even before you think about like the music industry, you think about like the one-hit wonders, right? They want to put out one song, it becomes a hit, or may not become a hit. More often than not, it does not become a hit. But in the case that it does, they're just like, this is great. I have all this fame. I have, and the money sometimes is not there, but they have all this fame and they think that that's all they need to be successful. And, that's just not the case.
So talking about fundraising, when you're now moving to this angle, you were backed by MasterCard and some pretty big names in the industry. And especially as an upstart, building and changing the dynamic of that industry, which is so centric on making everyone a creator and giving everyone that power to make money, not just make more followers.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
was that process? You went to an accelerator. When you were in the accelerator, you were already a lawyer. So how was
Right.
that pivot of moving into startups, but then also fundraising?
So it's two different things, right? I think as a lawyer, I was a solo practitioner. And so essentially what that means is that I had to eat what I killed, right? So I had my client base. If they didn't pay me, then I couldn't put food on the table. I could not support my family. And so right around the time I became a solo attorney, I had gotten married, to my wife, Christina. And so we had a daughter. And and the thing about, like, and there's some part of this is just like, the man comes out, right? You're just like, um, I know I need to support my family. And so it just became a different type of like hunger for me, right? Being a solo attorney. And so one of the great things about being a solo attorney, because I'd previously been working at law firms, is that there's something that happens to you psychologically when you see that first check written in your firm's name. And you're just like, wait a minute, someone decided to take their hard-earned money and write a check to a firm that I created. And I use that as an example because if you can do it that way, and that was the segue for me into being a tech entrepreneur, because I just took all those learnings, and I thought to myself, you know what? If I can convince people to part ways with their hard-earned money because they see the value in what I'm providing to them, then, and I can do it as a lawyer, why can't I do it as a tech entrepreneur? Right. And so the other thing was, as a lawyer, you're only one person, right? And if you're not doing the actual work, you may have a team, you may have like a paralegal, you may have a legal assistant, but ultimately the buck stops with you. And if you're not physically doing something, if you're not physically in the courthouse, or if you're not or in the courtroom, or if you're not physically drafting the contracts or reviewing the contracts, then who else is going to do it? With technology is different. You create something, people part ways with their hard-earned money because they, in exchange for the value you provide to them, and you use technology to do that. You can be everywhere at once, right? It can work 24/7. You can be asleep and you can still have people interacting and transacting on your platform, right? And so it took a mind shift first, a mental shift, and then it became what's the problem? What's the pain point? How can I solve that pain point effectively? Who do I need to hire? Who do I need to bring around me? Can I do everything? Can I code? Can I also, lead the product development? Can I also hire the right talent around me, right? So you start thinking about all those things, and then the fundraising is a separate part of this, right? Because at the end of the day, unless you have the money and the means to, then you're probably going to need outside investors to help you hire, to help you, build out at least the minimum viable product, the MVP. And so for me, fundraising was something that I knew I had to do. even though I initially bootstrapped, I started looking at grants and, fortunate for us, we were accepted into the Long Beach Accelerator, LBA. And so, we were able to tap into a lot of different resources through the LBA. And so that was like our first 100K investment. And that allowed me to hire developers. That allowed me to get the resources because, you have these sessions twice a week for about 2 or 3 hours. And so you're learning things about like how to fundraise beyond that initial investment. You're learning about like, how to identify your initial customer personas. You're learning about how to how to think about your product, how to think about like your market opportunity, your total addressable market, your serviceable addressable market, your serviceable attainable market, right? So you start thinking about all of the things that will essentially help you think about, I want to build this great big business that one day can either IPO or get acquired, right? And preferably IPO in my case, but yeah.
That's awesome. So, like, how's that? When are you thinking of IPOing? In how many years?
I mean, if it's up to me, I'd do it in a year. But I think realistically, probably in the next, I would say 7 years or so.
That's awesome. I think an IPO is so incredible because it's again like exactly what you said. Like, it's not for the feeling that someone else is writing a check to your firm and using your services, but then it's just the other end that someone else is trusting you to be a part owner in your company and trusting your leadership to run that company.
Exactly. And I think, a lot of times you see the splashy headlines, right? Oh, such and such, tech company raised $3 million. That's actually where the hard work begins because now you have convinced someone to, and obviously that in and of itself is an amazing accomplishment, right? When you're able to convince someone to invest in your vision, because at the end of the day, like when you're just starting out, it's really about you as the founder or the founding team, right? People are investing in you. They trust that you will be the one or your team will be the one the ones that will essentially figure it out regardless of the rough road that lies ahead, right? And so that's one part of it. But then the hard work begins after you close that round of funding, right? Now you have to figure out, you have to think about how am I going to return this capital, right? And not just, dollar for dollar. We're talking about outsized returns, right? Depending on the type of investor. And so, that's the reality of it, right? The reality is that someone invests $1 in you, they want $10 back or $20 back or $100 back, right? So they're looking at the outsized returns. And so depending on the investor, whether that's an angel investor, VC, or accelerator, at the end of the day, this is not charity. You're for profit. And you have to figure out how am I going to return this capital? And you have to be willing to go through all the blood, sweat, and tears and all of the ups and downs, the emotional highs and lows in order for you to accomplish that.
And it's yeah, absolutely. And it's just the finances. I think funding is so misunderstood just
Mhm.
because it's thought to be this incredible milestone for companies, but it just like more money, it just puts a timeline on you. If you the moment you raise a series A, that in 18 months you have to start raising a series B. If not, everyone's gonna be pissed.
Yeah, it's like it's we call it like the golden hamster wheel, right? So it's like um sure you're able to prove that you can raise money, but along with that comes certain milestones you have to meet, right? And so a lot of the times those milestones are articulated when you're actually in the process of fundraising. So for a seed round, for example, you may say the use of funds in order for me to, close a Series A or raise a successful Series A, we plan on hitting, 2 million ARR, right? Or we plan on having, 500,000 users paying us $20, whatever, right? Just making these numbers up. But the point is like you're selling to investors these milestones and you're painting the vision and the picture and you're telling the story that we're going to be able to achieve this in 18 months or less, right? Just in time for our next round of funding. And so you essentially become part of this golden hamster wheel and you're just constantly running and running and running. And there are, other investors that are at certain stages. So there may be like a Series B investor or a Series C investor or a later stage investor, growth stage, early stage investor, and they all have certain, metrics that they're looking at. looking for, or milestones that they're looking for companies to accomplish, right? And so like, it's never ending. But and you have to understand whether or not you're the type of person that can deal with that type of pressure. Because it's not just, and it doesn't ever end. As long as you are the founder of a company, even once you IPO, right?
Public
Now you have the public
markets.
markets, and now like, the stock can change. It can go up or down based off an earnings report, right? Or an anticipated earnings call, something that may be out of your control. Like maybe you just happen to be a company that is a tech stock company, and all of a sudden something happens in the industry, and all of a sudden your stock goes down, right? So like the public markets, so the point is like the pressure is always there. And you have to just understand, am I the type of person, or can I have the type of team around me? At the end of the day, the buck stops with you. So like, am I the type of person that can withstand, and will the pressure, make me, will I succumb to the pressure, or will the pressure create a diamond?
That's very well put because it's so interesting. Like every time I speak to founders, like the moment you raise a seed round,
Yeah,
within a couple months, like you have to start prepping for at least a
yeah,
bridge round, if not a Series
yeah,
A.
yeah, yeah.
And the idea is that you really are looking to grow at exponential terms, and that come things are going to break every single day.
Things are always breaking. You know, again, it's the pressure that comes with success, right? And if success was easy, everyone would be successful. If making money was easy, everyone would be rich, right? But that's just not the reality. And so um, that's where you have to figure out. And a lot of times early on, you're wearing so many different hats, right? You're like a generalist, and so at some point you have to say, I need to make sure that I'm hiring the smartest person for this particular role, whether that's product, whether that's, a CTO, if you don't already have one as part of your founding team, even all the way down to like an executive assistant, right? So like being able to have someone that can guard your time so you can focus on the things that drive the business in a meaningful and a positive direction, right? On behalf of your investors, on behalf of your team, because it's not just your investors, but a lot of times you're giving away equity in the form of stock options to your team. And so, they're expecting, and sometimes that could be the only payment for them. Maybe they're not on salary, right? Sometimes it could just be they have an equity stake in the company. And so they're expecting you to guide them and lead them and to increase the value of that company over time, right? And so like, and in the process of doing that, you have to make sure you're hiring, you have to make sure that you have the right people in place that can help you, fix those issues, because there will be all sorts of issues that come up in business, and that's just part of business, right? Nothing is like this linear, like, perfect road of utopia, right? It's a bunch of like winding roads, it's a bunch of hills, it's a bunch of valleys and peaks, and that's just the way that business works.
Yeah, and like you need to grow and raise really quick after, especially once you have the team on equity, just ESOPs, the moment.
Yeah.
It's a responsibility. Honestly, as a founder, it's a privilege to be able to do that. But then with great power comes great responsibility.
Great power comes great responsibility, exactly. And so, yeah, there are a lot of different ways to get the team that you need to have in place. ESOPs, equity stock options, are one option. Um, and it also depends on the market. I mean, sometimes you have people that are only interested in receiving a salary, or maybe salary. Sometimes it can be a reduced salary, and maybe below market, but you also have the equity to kind of compensate for that. So, but yeah, I think the power that you have to make sure you're doing it, using it responsibly.
Absolutely, and it's so important because the amount of trust you get in. So finances, creators oftentimes struggle with finances, and that's
A lot of
something.
times it's a pain point. It's a pain point.
And that's something like you guys have been working to solve with Bump. What were some observations in the market that you noticed that you per se did not expect?
The fact that creators didn't know their worth.
Mm.
It was really interesting. So I talked about how we started out as this double-sided marketplace connecting creatives, artists with industry experts. We pivoted in part we couldn't really, the business plateaued. And the reason why it plateaued was because a lot of creatives said, look, I feel like I am getting the same bits of advice just from different experts. And so why should I continue to pay for that? Right. So we noticed after about 6 or 7 sessions, these were like virtual one-on-one sessions. So like they had to purchase credits through owners. And then based on the amount that the industry expert was charging, they would then, we would facilitate the payment to the industry expert. So we were running that through the entire marketplace. But what we noticed was that after about 6 or 7 sessions, a lot of the creators were like, I'm not booking anymore. And so we dug into the problem and said, well, why aren't you booking anymore? We thought it may have been a product issue, maybe the video conferencing technology wasn't working properly. We didn't know what it was, right? And so we found out that they just were getting the same advice, so they could have Googled it. So we're like, well, that's not going to work for us. And so so then we again went back to the drawing board. We started asking them like, what if you could wave a magic wand, like what are some of the biggest issues that you want to have solved for yourself? And funding kept coming up. That was a recurring response. Also, a way to like be able to negotiate brand deals. And that's obviously understanding their value and understanding their worth. And then other things came along, like, we started talking to creators about building wealth, and, we'll go into that in a second about some of the other partnerships and how we started, pivoting and started incorporating like enterprise partnerships into our business model. But but that's really the genesis, like the inability to like really make sure they're managing effectively their financing. So those were kind of like their finances. Those were kind of like the things that kept coming up in our responses. And so the other challenge that we had, which was kind of more of a simpler challenge, was that when we would tell people about owners, they would actually type into the web browser owners.com, which is the correct spelling. But here we are thinking that we're geniuses, like, oh, owners stands for own yours, right? That's the play on words. They were never typing in ownors.com. And so what we did was we told them how to type it in correctly, and they said, oh, I can bump with this, I can bump that. And that's where the name Bump came from. It came from, again, from our customers telling us once they finally got to the right web page that they could, oh, I understand this. Okay, I could bump that, right? And so, everything, even down to the name, changed for us, right? Because obviously you don't want to lose customers because you think that I came up with this genius play on words, and like it's genius to you, but it's not genius to your customers. They can't find who you, they don't know where you are, right? They're typing in the wrong web browser, typing in the wrong URL. So that's so going back to your question about the financings, and the biggest pain point, not knowing their value and not knowing their worth. And so what we did about that was we created this real-time market valuation. So think about how the stock market works, where it goes up and down, again, based on the news. So for us, the market value is largely driven by creators posting content. So as they're posting content, as their followers grow, or as their followers drop off, as their engagement goes up or down, their market value goes up or down. And then we tie that, and we use that as criteria in order for them to get access to funding, right? So that's where the partnership with MasterCard comes in. We also have a partnership with Bell Bank now. Bell Bank is one of the largest privately owned banks in the country, $13 billion assets under management. We also have a partnership with Northwestern Mutual. And so these partnerships were largely driven by us, again, understanding the creatives' pain points, but also the market value that we were providing to these creators in real time attracted these enterprise partners who said, you know what, we want to better understand how valuable creators are as customers. Can we offer them, and are the market evaluations a big enough incentive for us to offer them like a free $100 that we can put into your checking account if you open up a checking account today, right? So that's what I was saying about like our business model then changing to like paid pilots and doing enterprise partnerships. But it again started with the genesis of working with creatives.
That's so interesting because, not just like the funding houses and Mastercard and Bell Bank, but it I think financial education has been missing in the very fundamentals. So
And
when
that's just in society in general.
yeah,
Financial education is missing, but yeah, it definitely is missing with creatives too.
like where do you feel were the pain points for them? What part of finance did they not understand? Most creators.
That money, just because you have a lot right now doesn't mean you're gonna have a lot tomorrow. I think that's one big thing. And I mean, we last year we were able to track, we saw $25 million in just unclean revenue left on the table, or that we were able to track through our platform through Bump, right? And so on behalf of creatives, a lot of times they just don't, they think that the money's always going to be there, right? So it's like I have, again, going back to the one hit wonder thing, right? Like you make a bunch of money, and it may not even be a lot of money. It could be, $20,000, $10,000, which is, it's certainly nothing to sneeze at. It's good money. But what happens is they think that they're gonna make that money again tomorrow or a month or 6 months from now or a year from now. And when that doesn't happen, now you're in a situation where you're like, I should have saved, I should have done the things that a person that maybe was a little bit more financial savvy or understood how money works and how currency works, it's always flowing, right? So in that situation, that they probably would have taken the time to understand how money works, then they probably wouldn't have been so gung-ho on spending money on, like, some fancy car or like a necklace or something that doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So I think a lot of times we have creatives that just think that the money is never ending, like it's always going to be there, right? And so you just have to respect money.
So talking about retention. Tech and retention oftentimes are the biggest challenge. Just making sure the customer doesn't just come in the door, but doesn't run out,
Yep.
starting fire.
Yeah. 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 In the beginning for us, I mean, I mentioned in the beginning that, we noticed that a lot of our customers were booking 6 or 7 sessions on average, and then they were dropping off, right? They weren't actually per se leaving the platform. They actually were just like not doing anything. They weren't active, they were inactive, right? And so sometimes that's a bigger problem than having someone drop off, because it's like you built this amazing thing, at least you thought it was amazing, but and customers were initially using it, but now they are not using it. And so we had a retention issue in the sense that we had more of an inactive issue, active versus inactive issue, as opposed to retention issue. And so that's where we decided to ask the question, like, why aren't you booking any more sessions? What's going on? Whether, and it could have, I mean, it was a lot of things that we were thinking in theory could be the reason, right? It could have been they just weren't happy with the sessions. There were some issues with the technology, the video conferencing, maybe video conferencing technology. Maybe we had customers that had paid for a session, but the industry expert didn't show up. And so when we found out that it was just they weren't getting value out of the different sessions after about the third or fourth one, or after about the sixth or seventh one, that's what made us go back to the drawing board, right? And this when the pivots came in. But retention now is a lot different. And the reason why it's a lot different is because they see value in the market valuations that we provide to them, right? They're tracking it all the time. Like we look at the numbers, we're like, wow, the usage rates are really high, right? Because they're obviously like always looking, they're like, we're gonna post something, and then we're gonna see if our market value went up, right? Oh crap, it went down a little bit. Oh, it's dipping. And then they can look at it over, they can do like a 60-day look back, right? So they can go back, depending on when they join the platform, they can go back to that first day and they can see the fluctuations in their market value. And so the retention is a lot different. The other thing is, like, think about how funding works, right? Like, and think about how banking works. How many times as a consumer have you switched banks? Probably not that often, right? Like once you're locked into a bank, you're locked into that bank, right? And so like that's where the partnership with Bell Bank has been so strong for us, because it's like once a creator is locked into, once they've made that first external bank transfer into a Bump account powered by Bell Bank, we're not seeing them, say, I want to pull my money out, right? And a lot of it just becomes like, let's continue to add a better way for them to be able to track their transactions, a better way for them to be able to understand over the next 12 months what, based on how they're spending, what that's gonna look like for them. But again, it's like we're providing financial education through the product, right? So it's product-driven financial education. So that has led to much higher retention rates as opposed to in the past where it's like, oh, this kind of feels like a one and done type of thing, right? So
People love to speculate, like everyone follows the stock market constantly.
exactly. And that's the thing, like people are even when you if when you're invested in stock, you're anticipating that the market is going to go up, right? No one is thinking about, I'm going to make an investment because I want to lose this money, right? No one's thinking about that. And so like that's how creators are doing. They're like, I'm going to post something because I expect my market value to go up, right? They're not thinking, it's going to go down. Now, obviously, sometimes it goes down, and that lights a fire into them. They're like, oh, you know what? Now I need to go out here and I need to put out more content. I need to beat my previous top score.
Avenue to speculate.
Right,
Which is great.
right.
People love it. That's awesome. So now we're running a team, scaling a team, hiring people.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, sometimes having to let go of people.
Yes.
Scaling up, building, growing the team. What's leadership been like for you?
All those things. Leadership is hiring the right people, sometimes hiring the wrong person. It's also recognizing when a particular role is no longer needed. And you have to, sometimes it means that, you're getting, tight on cash. And so you may have to downsize a few folks. I mean, I think and leadership is also making sure that there's high morale, making sure that people are dialed in and they understand the mission, they buy into the culture. I think, leadership is also making sure that you're doing whatever it takes to, if you need to cut down on the burn, if you need to go out and fundraise again, you do whatever you need to take do whatever it takes to make sure the business continues to survive and thrive. So I think leadership is all of those things. I think there's no one size fits all approach to leadership. I think, it's all those things. And even on top of all that, you have to work on yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So on top of all the things that you're doing, working in the business, working on the business, you also have to work on yourself. And so for me personally, I spend a lot of time listening to different audiobooks on, a lot of it is mostly on business. I also listen to personal development or read personal development books because I understand the importance of making sure that I'm working on myself too, because as I learn more, as I continue to grow, then that directly benefits the company, right? And it indirectly or directly benefits the team. And it, indirectly or directly benefits, the overall goal for not just your personal goals, but also your business goals, right? So I think leadership encompasses all of those things.
I love that. What's your favorite audiobook?
My favorite one is by an author named Keith Cameron Smith, and it's called The Top 10 Distinctions Between Millionaires and Middle Class. And the reason why it's my favorite is because it helped me change my mindset about how I think about money and how I think about my time and how when I'm having those internal conversations, am I asking myself empowering questions or am I asking myself disempowering questions? Or am I just making statements, right? So it's one thing to say, I'll never have money. It's another thing to say, how can I make $1 million? When you say how I'll never have money, that's a closed-minded, you're not firing off the synapses, you're not thinking, right? When you say, how can I make $1 million? That opens up your mind to asking different questions. So I think that's probably my favorite go-to one, because it helped me think about just how money works to avoid having a scarcity mentality and thinking about having an abundance mentality and understanding that, you know what, there actually is more than enough for everyone on this planet, right? There's more than enough and there's abundance, and it's just about the mindset.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was an absolute honor.
Thank you for having me.